All right, so we wanted to do a quick video on the subject matter of doing our gear inspections. So there are two types of inspections that we need to get done. First one is a pre-use inspection. That pre-use inspection is going to be done by you as the rescuer before you put it on, each time you go to put it on. The pre-use inspection should be a quick, down and dirty, 60-second inspection to make sure that there's no damage to your gear as you go to use it. So it's just a quick once over, make sure that everything is good. That's your harness, that's your lanyard, or your connecting device, your rappel device, the rope, the anchor connector, etc. The other type is the one that we want to focus on today, is your annual inspection. Now that annual inspection should be slow and methodic. It should be detailed, and we're looking for minutia, little teeny tiny things that are wrong with it, because as we know, depending on where we're working, we might damage the harness even more and potentially cause it to fail. So when we do these inspections, we're looking at 5 areas when we look at our harness or our lanyard. The 5 areas that we're going to check out are going to be hardware, software, stitching, labels, and function. All right. So the first thing we're always going to check is going to be the labels, just because it's the easiest thing to check. It's the fastest thing to check. Labels need to be legible. They need to be intact. They still need to be there, so please don't cut them off. When we talk about hardware, we're looking for cracks, deformities, rust, corrosion. If you're breaking your hardware, it's usually due to bad care, meaning it's been left out where it could rust or corrode. If you've got aluminum, it got smashed into something like that. If we're looking at software, webbing, we're talking about cuts, tears, burns, frays, some kind of mystery stain, writing on the harness in a spot that the manufacturer doesn't allow you to write on it, something like that. The stitch patterns, we're looking for broken stitches, rotted stitches, things like that. And then function needs to work the way the manufacturer designed it to work. So making sure that the friction buckles work, make sure that the snaps work, etc. So the example we're going to use is my Petzl Aveo harness. A lot of us on the team have this one. First thing we're going to check is going to be the labels. My labels should pop out. They should be intact. They should be legible. They'll tell me what certifications or what standards the harness meets, when the harness was built, all the basic information that I need for the documentation component, which we're going to talk about later. Now, you can do this a bunch of different ways. You could go through all the hardware and then come back and look at all the different webbing. A way to kind of make yourself a little bit more sane is if you just kind of do a top-down approach. So start at the back D-ring, checking this, the D-ring, cracks, deformities, rust, corrosion. Right here, this is a shock load indicator. So if I was tied off with a lanyard or something to my back D-ring and I fell and there was enough force, this little telltale will be popped. So we want to check and make sure that it's not deployed. As we move down through the back of the harness, check and make sure that the friction buckle works and that it's not damaged. The hem at the end of the webbing, make sure that that is still stitched properly. As we move down, I've got stitch patterns on the back, making sure that they're good. I'm going to check the back side, and I'm sorry, the front side and the back side. As we move down the harness, we're going to get into, we have the padding that's here. This is obviously for comfort, but we want to make sure that it's not in bad shape. When we take a look at the form or the PPE instruction guide that Petzl gives us, we can follow that up for more guidance. Make sure that my gear loops are good on both sides. While I'm here, I can also check my side D-rings to ensure that they're not damaged, cracked, deformities, rust, corrosion. Remember, on the webbing, we're checking for cuts, tears, burns, frays, mystery stains that are on there. Oftentimes, if I'm rubbing my hand across it, I may feel it before I actually see any kind of damage there. Check the other side. buckle, hem, move down into the legs. Again, more stitch patterns. Checking as I go through. Once I'm done with the back, flip the harness over. Now I can get down to the front of the harness. Friction buckles, hems, front D-ring, more stitch patterns. Now my version of the harness has a carabiner that connects into this webbing. Some of you may have a delta. Make sure that the delta hasn't been flipped around facing the other way. There's a plastic catch or keeper that comes across the front. Make sure that it's actually in front. Move down through the front of the harness. And one of the areas that I want to make sure that we focus on are these buckles. So this component here is plastic. Okay, so you have the metal buckle that comes across, but then you have these little plastic teeth that lock this in place, making sure that these are not damaged. All right, that wraps up the harness. All right, so now we're looking at like a Y lanyard or some type of fall protection lanyard that you may have for tower rescue or for just personal fall protection. We're looking at the same 5 areas: hardware, software, stitching, labels, and function. So on the energy absorber, the shock absorber, there's going to be, most likely it's here, is going to be a set of labels. So here's all the information that you're looking for on your harness. You have your snap hooks. Make sure, give them 3 open and closes. Make sure we don't have any damage to the snap hooks. On the rebar hooks, again, check and make sure that we don't have any damage to these. This manufacturer actually puts a shock load indicator onto the leg in addition to the shock pack itself. As I work my way down through the lanyard, checking for cracks, deformities, rust, corrosion on any of the hardware, cuts, tears, burns, frays, mystery stains on the webbing, looking at any stitch patterns for broken, pulled, or rotting stitches. All right, so we're moving on to the less exciting component of doing inspections, is going to be the documentation component of it. If you're using Petzl gear, if you go to Petzl's website, you can pull these up. We've actually attached them in the training packet that was sent out. The one that's on Target Solutions should have these forms in there. But Petzl actually gives you a kind of a step-by-step inspection procedure of what to do and how to do it. All right. So as you go through, they'll tell you what you're looking for depending on your type or your model. At the very end of this guide, they give you some really great pictures of what you're looking for. So on your equipment loop, damaged straps, damaged protective fabric. So they do a nice job of kind of making this as user-friendly as possible. There's that example of having that delta reversed. You'll see a nice pick in this webbing right here. Also where they have someone's written their name on here. If you need to write your name on the harness, there's enough spots on that harness for you to write your name with a gray Sharpie or something like that. If you want to write your name here on the comfort component, much better spot to put it than say up here on the webbing. What we really don't want to do is we don't want to have use like a paint stick or something like that. The problem with the paint is that once it dries onto the webbing, it gets into those fibers. And once the fibers start to move again, it can really start to damage stuff. So that's why a lot of manufacturers are just not crazy about you writing on their stuff at all, let alone with like a paint stick. So they give you some more cut webbing stuff. And you can see they give you an icon that says trash it. All right, so that's the inspection procedure. To document this, they also give you an inspection form. Now, I don't have a full version of Adobe yet on my iPad, so I can't actually fill this in. But on my laptop, I can fill in all this information, and that way I print it off, store it, or save it on a city computer or something, so that you have that documented inspection. The pre-use inspection, you don't need to fill this out, but for that annual inspection, there needs to be documentation on there. And you can see at the bottom, inspected by, who are you with, the date. That way you are set up for your inspections. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email, a text. Be more than willing to help.